All right, hello everyone, and welcome to our Christchurch and Auckland offices and to everyone online. Today we have a seminar on creating safe urban environments. We have a fantastic panel of three speakers who will be providing different perspectives about what it takes to create those safe urban environments. And this seminar today is part of National Road Safety Week. So that is a break event, and we've also got Carolyn Perry in our Auckland office. She is the Development Director of Break and will be saying a few words about Break and how we as a profession can help sponsor, donate to Break as well to help them continue with all of their good work. So this is a Australasian College of Road Safety organised event, so some of you may not be aware of what the college is. It's an organisation with Australia and New Zealand professionals who are interested and passionate about improving road safety. That's effectively what the college does. It involves everyone from road safety coordinators through to professionals, professional drivers, so in the trucking industry, everyone and anyone who's interested in road safety. Have a look at the ACRS.org.au website if you want to find out some more. The college is organised at a regional level, so it has an executive committee that comprises the chairs of the various regions. I am the co-chair of the New Zealand chapter of the College of Road Safety, along with Rebecca Brooklyn, who's from the University of Otago. If you're not a member, can I encourage you to consider being a member? There's a lot of benefits with being a member. The ACRS pushes out a weekly newsletter, which includes news from all around Australia, New Zealand, and globally as well. That's really important to keep abreast of. And quarterly, there is a road safety journal, which is peer-reviewed papers that both members and non-members can contribute to as well. So that's a really useful way to promote topics that you're interested in and to keep well informed about the latest happenings in road safety. One of the really big benefits, I'll click through. Here's an example. Once you are a member, you can access the information all online now. So there's a copy of the latest Journal of Road Safety, peer-reviewed papers and contributed articles in there. You can also search a database for all the previous conferences that are held and through the Journal of Road Safety as well. So if there's a particular topic area that you're interested in, as a member, you can access the relevant articles and use those for your project that you may be working on. And I've mentioned the annual conference as well. So the College of Road Safety runs an annual road safety conference. There was none in 2020, but the Melbourne one has been deferred and pushed back a year. If you haven't been to a conference before, can I highly recommend it? I know myself and my colleagues at ABLE really enjoy going to these. It's about 3 days of full immersement in a very wide range of road safety topics, from community programs right through to the latest research. And the excellent news for New Zealand and becoming a member here is that the college intends to bring the conference to Christchurch in 2022. So I'm looking to help boost membership of the college and get some interest so that we can put on a very strong conference in September 2022 in the new convention centre here in Christchurch. Right, now before we get into the panel, I will hand over to Carolyn Perry. So I mentioned before that Carolyn is the Development Director of Break, the road safety charity. Carolyn will take you through some of the details about Break. But before Carolyn starts, I will introduce our speakers just so that we're not going back and forth. So we have three wonderful speakers today. We have Bryan Sherritt, who's the Executive General Manager of Safety at Auckland Transport. Bryan will be well known to many of you. Bryan's team's actively embedding Vision Zero and safe system principles across Auckland Transport business. with a view of mitigating the road safety crisis that both Auckland and New Zealand are currently experiencing. And Bryan will talk about Vision Zero and Auckland's Speed Management Plan and the implementation of Tranche 1 and their planning for Tranche 2. Our second speaker today is Hamish Mackie, Director of Mackie Research Consulting. And Hamish will speak to you about understanding how people work and key principles for designing safe and user-friendly streets. And our third presenter today is Jeanette Ward, who's a Technical Director here at ABLE. And Jeanette will talk about the art of low-speed street design, permanent and transitional design features that can be used to achieve low speeds. So I'll hand over to Caroline.
I just want to mention about the Q&A.
Oh, that's right. Sorry. For our online audience, if you've got a question for one of our speakers, feel free to use the chat box to upload your question in there. And if you think that that's a particularly good question, others online can like that, and that will increase its voting, and we'll get to those questions at the end if we have time. Also should mention for people in the Christchurch and Auckland offices, if you've got a question for our speaker, just hold on to that thought. We will do a full Q&A session after the three speakers have presented.
ABLE putting on this session today and inviting me to speak, and also thank you to them and to the Australasian College of Road Safety for supporting Road Safety Week as well with this session. So I was just invited along today to give you a little bit of background to, oh, sorry. There we go. So I was just invited along today to give you a little bit of background to Brake and to Road Safety Week for those of you who haven't come across us before, and also to give you some information about how you can get involved and support the week and support Brake if you are interested as well. So Brake's a national charity working to prevent road deaths and injuries and to make communities safer, and we also provide free support to people who've been affected by crashes as well, bereaved and injured in crashes. So we do this through a variety of different initiatives, Road Safety Week being our flagship campaign each year, but also through activities such as providing information and resources to teachers and childcarers to teach road safety, through our Beat Days, which is running today nationally with educators and communities, and through our Global Fleet Champions initiative, helping companies to reduce incidents involving at-work drivers and vehicles. And ABLE are one of our previous award winners through our Fleet Champions Awards as well. And we also provide free support resources to adults and to children who've been bereaved in road crashes, so providing emotional support and practical information on the procedures that take place following a crash and helping them to recover from that devastation. As I mentioned, Road Safety Week is our flagship campaign for the year, and this year's the 9th Road Safety Week, so it's the 9th time we've run one of these weeks. And I know some of you are already supporting the week with activities and getting involved, so thanks very much for that. If you're not already involved, then there's still an opportunity to. Just feel free to go to the website and take a look. Road Safety Week is really about encouraging communities and inspiring them to kickstart campaigns on road safety locally about the issues that affect them. And thanks to QBE and Wakatahi, who sponsor the week, we're able to provide communities, schools, organisations with free resources and activities for them to get involved in the week and help them to kickstart those campaigns. And it also aims to provide those working in road safety, so like all of you, with an opportunity to heighten the awareness of existing campaigns and activities that you might be doing, and an opportunity to link that activity to a national campaign as well. So this year the theme is Step Up for Safe Streets, and communities across the country are learning about the safe system approach to road safety and how those design-led solutions can help us to reduce deaths and injuries on our roads and help us all to get around in safe and healthy ways. So if you're not already signed up, please do feel free to go and take a look on the website at what's available. And for those of you in Auckland and Christchurch, we've also got some resources available that you can take away today if you want to. So there's some that you can take back to your own organisations. And for those in Auckland, I am also looking to get some extra selfie photos with our pledge boards. Great. For Road Safety Week, so if anyone's willing to do that at the end of the session, please come and have a selfie taken with me, so we've got some extra social media footage to go on photos. That'd be great. We're also a member of the Yellow Ribbon Road Safety Alliance, which is a group of organisations committed to raising awareness of road trauma in New Zealand. And we use the colour yellow as a symbol to both raise awareness and make a personal commitment to road safety. So this Road Safety Week, thanks to Vector Lights and Road Safety Education, who are another Alliance member, the Auckland Harbour Bridge has turned yellow for the week, along with a number of other icons all around the country, including the Anzac Parade Bridge in Hamilton, which is also on that slide as well. So we're looking to grow this movement further for road safety in 2021. So if you're interested in getting involved in that, please do get in contact with us. But also you can support the week easily this week by going yellow, wearing something yellow, wearing a yellow ribbon pin to support road safety and raise awareness as well. And on that note, just a very quick heads up that the next Road Safety Week is the 17th to the 23rd of May 2021, which is a UN Global Road Safety Week, and will launch the second decade of action for road safety as well for the UN. So finally, a huge thank you to ABLI for fundraising as part of this event as well, and encouraging people to make donations and making a donation of $500 themselves to Brake. If you're also able to support their fundraising and donate to us, then please visit Give a Little. You can either take a copy of that link or feel free to go to Give a Little and just search Brake, and ABLI's fundraiser will come up in the search there. For as you can see, even small amounts make a really big difference to our work. So we really appreciate any support that you can give, particularly this year when fundraising has been challenging due to COVID as well. But our support resources are still going out to families who've been bereaved. So any help you can give is really appreciated. And as of yesterday, there have been 270 deaths on our roads this year so far. And as an organisation that supports people who've been affected by crashes, we see the devastating consequences that they have and the suffering that those families will be going through. So we appreciate the work that all of you are doing to make our roads safer and to reduce the deaths and injuries that occur. You have incredibly important roles to play, so thank you so much for all of the work that you do and for supporting Road Safety Week. And thank you again to ABLI and ACRS for running this session, and I look forward to hearing all of the speakers today and hope everybody enjoys the session. Thanks.
Hello everybody, thanks for coming along this morning, and thank you to ABLI for facilitating this event, and thank you to the ACRS also for running this event as well. Today I wanted to talk about AT's journey in terms of Vision Zero and road safety, our strategy, and also touch on our sort of speed management work that we've done as well. We'll just start off with our vision, and I'm probably preaching to the converted here in terms of people in this room and in Christchurch as well. But by 2050, our goal is to eliminate transport deaths and serious injuries in Tamaki Makaurau. When I say our, it's not just AT's vision. The Vision Zero strategy that Auckland Transport has been running with is an Auckland strategy. So it's been developed and is owned by the Tamaki Makaurau Transport Safety Governance Group, and that's made up of Auckland Transport, Auckland Council, New Zealand Police, ACC, MOT, Auckland Regional Public Health, and a couple of other groups in there as well. So it's not just an AT strategy, it's actually an Auckland-wide thing. We recognise we can't do this all ourselves. But that strategy embraces the Vision Zero principles. We're putting human safety at the heart of everything that we do. And the strategy covers not just road safety, but it covers all transport modes. Roads, roadsides, buses, trains, ferries, walking, cycling, driving, and micromobility. We believe that everyone deserves to get home safely every day. Just on what Carolyn was just saying, in 2019, 40 people died, and there was 567 seriously injured on our roads in Tamaki Makaurau. And whilst that's a considerable reduction from 2017, it's still way too many. Just in terms of AT's journey itself and where we're at with things, so just going back to late 2017, these are some stats, some figures here which show how Auckland was tracking in terms of road safety, and it's a really sad story and an appalling story in many respects. So the AT board commissioned a report, and it showed that Auckland was genuinely facing a road safety crisis. Since 2014, deaths on Auckland's roads due to crashes increased more than 3 times the rate of the rest of New Zealand and more than 5 times the growth of travel in Auckland. So there was a disproportionate increase in deaths and serious injury on our road networks. In 2017, as I mentioned before, the 2019 stats, in 2017 we had 64 people die on Auckland's road and 749 were seriously injured. On average, that's 1 person died and 14 others were seriously injured every week. For a first world country like New Zealand and a city like Auckland, that's just not appropriate, and we can't accept that. The review that was carried out stated quite frankly that Auckland is experiencing what could be legitimately described as a crisis in road safety performance. The review itself had 74 recommendations to be carried out. In terms of our response, so I mentioned earlier the Vision Zero strategy of Tamaki Makaurau. This document itself is a world-class Vision Zero strategy. So I think Auckland is one of the few cities in the Southern Hemisphere that's actually adopted fully and completely the Vision Zero principles. It's not a road to zero, it's not towards zero, it's actually the vision of zero, and that's where we're going. So our target is to have 0 transport-related deaths by 2050. So the recommendations of the review that was carried out was to embrace the Vision Zero and safe system approach, and a key part of that was setting safe speed limits on our network. The other thing that's mentioned just with the strategy itself, and on the other side of the screen there, was the 10-year road safety program business case, which was also adopted immediately after the Vision Zero strategy was adopted by the Auckland Transport Board. What it sets out for is investment of $700 million over a 10-year period to meet the targets of the strategy. And there's interim targets where we're looking at actually having no more than 250 deaths or serious injuries by 2030. So that's the investment piece, which backs up the strategic piece. I should mention also, sorry, just back on that, the other part of that is that the what we're looking for by 2030 was about a 60% reduction of what we had in 2017, and that will prevent more than 3,000 deaths and serious injuries happening on Auckland's roads over the next 10 years. A key part of this, though, is safe and appropriate speed. So the business case I mentioned earlier was a multifaceted business case dealing with a whole range of issues in terms of road safety. Yet one of the key planks of that was actually around having safe and appropriate speeds. So AT embarked on this journey 2 years ago, a bit over 2 years ago now, targeting the top 10% of high-risk roads. It's defined by the Wakakatari crash analysis system and its Mega Maps risk assessment tool. It involved basically the largest ever consultation that Auckland Transport has ever done. We had more than 11,700 submissions about the speed management plan for Tranche 1. And the Tranche 1 part was actually talking about setting appropriate and safe speed limits in the Auckland city centre and predominantly the rural local boards of Rodney and Franklin. So in terms of measuring the performance of the speed management plan, there are some things that we're looking at. One is just looking at what is the average travel speed of vehicles now travelling on the network. That needs to decrease, obviously. Another performance measure was actually looking at customer and community sentiment and perceptions about the speed limit stuff. And the third one, and the most important one of that, which will happen sometime after the implementation of the speed zones, will be actually the decrease in DSI. Just in terms, though, of the understanding and knowledge around what people think of the speed limit changes, So we did a survey looking at 610 Auckland drivers in July 2020 after the implementation of the new limits. That showed that 61% of the respondents were supportive of the changes. The vast majority, 93%, showed a level of concern with the number of deaths and serious injuries on New Zealand's roads, and 7 in 10 believe the speed limit changes will help reduce the risk and severity of injury when crashes occur. This to me was quite remarkable, I think, because I did try to do a very similar thing in Victoria, and we weren't able to get that across the line, because the view was that people would not accept it. So kudos, I think, to Aucklanders and to New Zealanders generally to actually understand the issue and actually support what we are doing. In terms of where we've been tracking over the last couple of years, this is an interesting graph here, because if we look at that, the 2017 numbers of where we're at, so a big increase from 2014 to 2017. The light blue there is talking about, you know, a trajectory where we might have been if we hadn't have acted, and that's a pretty dire outcome. And the SOI target there, that's the statement of intent, which, if you like, is a contract between Auckland Transport and Auckland Council. The council hold us to account to some performance measures, and they've set some ambitious targets. So we've actually been tracking quite well in terms of where death and serious injury actually have been going. In 2020, it's even better again, but so whilst there's things that we've done around speed and infrastructure we've put in place, also I suspect that COVID has played a role in that as well. So just other things that AT have been doing, we've been setting up a safety centre of excellence within AT, within my team. We've been collaborating with our Tamaki Makaurau partners, police in particular, around the speed stuff, making sure that enforcement happens as it needs to. And really sort of building on that sort of road safety partnership approach across Auckland.
What were the problems that created the rise in 2015, 16, 17?
Well, there's a whole range of issues, but that business improvement review articulates that really nicely. It's a very large document, but there were a range of issues that weren't happening appropriately in Auckland. In particular. So I'll just push on. Just in terms of emphasis on speed, just to be really clear about that, the speed stuff actually works. And one of the things we'll say is that while speed's not the cause of every crash, it actually dictates the outcome of every crash. So the speed of your vehicle, the energy of your vehicle, actually that energy is transferred through your body when you crash, and that determines whether you walk away, whether you're seriously injured, or whether you're killed. I should point out, as I said before, speed is only one part of a multifaceted program we've got looking at safety on Auckland's roads. And here, I guess, there's some general things that we often talk about in terms of, you know, the higher the speed, the greater the death risk. And of course, the other thing I should say there in terms of speed, speed also does play a role in actually your response times, and does also increase the likelihood of crashes as well. Just in terms of the other more strategic sort of alignments, I suppose, just to be really clear, Vision Zero strategy and the New Zealand government's Road to Zero strategy both place human wellbeing at the heart of transport planning. So the Vision Zero strategy for Auckland lines up really nicely with the Auckland plan for 2050, and it's also, whilst the Vision Zero strategy came before the Road to Zero strategy, we were very supportive of the central government's view and push with their particular plan around road safety. Does it work? So there's a couple of examples here, and often we talk about examples of where speed reduction has reduced DSI, and if they're from overseas, people say, well, overseas is different to New Zealand. Well, that might be true, I don't think it is though. But here's some examples though, in Auckland itself, you know, where existing 30 km limits have seen a positive reduction in injury crashes. So the examples there, the Wynyard Quarter, for example, where we've seen crashes reduced by 25%. Deaths and serious injuries fell to zero. The 30k limit on Queen Street has been in operation since November 2008 and has seen crash rates fall by almost 40%, including a 36% reduction in deaths and serious injuries. And Whitford Road also a significant reduction in deaths and serious injuries. So the speed stuff actually does work. It's a really cost-effective way of implementing some of the outcomes we've got in terms of the program we're looking at. And just in terms, there's some other sort of clear international examples as well, where other countries have actually taken this on board, and just the remarkable reductions they've also been able to achieve in terms of death and serious injury. I just wanted to say, just briefly though, the DSI stuff was dear to my heart and it's quite important, but there are other benefits as well, including how we actually get around the city, and it actually is an enabler for some of the things that Hamish and the last presenter will be talking about later today as well. And as we talk, connectivity creates wealth, so the better we can move around our city in a safe way, the more important and better the outcomes will be. And just touching on sort of health and social benefits of active transport, you know, prevention of serious illness, we know about that. Social health benefits, people are more engaged and connected, mental health improvement, and we reach the recommended levels of physical activity when using active transport. So that's probably all I was going to say in terms of my presentation, but that's just a holistic view, I guess, of where AC is at and where Auckland is travelling in terms of road safety. And it lines up very nicely with the theme of today's presentation, I do believe. So with that, that's my presentation.
Thank you, Bryan.
Well, tēnā koutou katoa. I'm Hamish Mackie from Mackie Research, and I'm going to be talking about people and how they work and how that relates to how we threats, in relation to road safety, but also for other aspects of the transport system. So there's 5 things really that I want us quickly sort of cover off, and firstly how we can design streets to be functional, actually work, but also how we can do that at a network level. That's really, really important if we're going to get the benefits across the country and the city we really need. How we can work with people to get and with them. How we need to integrate our ways of thinking, so road safety with other aspects. And finally, how we can look at ourselves and how we organise ourselves and work together to actually get more effective improvements in some of these projects. So, I've jumped ahead here. Let's look at the street to start with. It's a nice street, isn't it? It's, and imagine you've just turned into it in your bike or your car, or you're a pedestrian, and what do you see? There's not a single line marking here, no signs, there's people, there's places to sit, there's greenery, and this is telling you very, very clearly this is a place to go around, and the appropriate thing to do here is probably to go slow and be. If you contrast that with a motorway or an arterial road, perhaps Simon Street just around the corner, it looks very, very different. Lots of lines, lots of signs, and bus lanes and things like that, and that's appropriate for the arterial road. So and you can see here there's sort of temporary things being used through tactical urbanism, which is, you know, a really promising way that we can get change rapidly. The thing is, we need to be able to do this at a network level as well. So it's good to sort of focus on the functions, the functionality of the streets. How do we do that at a network level? What we know, and this is going all the way back to the sort of 80s and 90s really, with this concept of self-explaining roads, is that if we can actually reproduce this functionality, these nice local streets, the more functional sort of arterial roads and things like that, we know and we can do that at a network level, that leads to road safety benefits. And we know that it makes it a nicer place for people to work and live as well. So and the way that it works is that people have this mental map. People have a mental image, or a schema, as we call it, of how the world works. So we have this mental image of what a nice street, a quiet street, a slow street looks like. We have this mental image of what a through street looks like. And if we can sort of reproduce that, just like the stop sign that we see almost every day, this creates a level of habituation. That means that we don't even think about it, we just start automatically behaving in the way that we should be. And if we can do that at an area-wide, a city-wide, and national level, then we're going to get some of the road safety and other benefits that we'll be hoping for. So we've tried to do this, at least at a neighbourhood level, but you know, these projects always have a boundary around them. And this was self-explaining roads in Point England. We created these functionally distinct categories of streets, local streets that look like that, through roads that look like that, and it created these different speed profiles, 30k speed profiles or less on the local streets, and more homogeneous speeds all around in these different categories. What we found is that the safety or the high severity crashes, and serious injuries reduced by 48% in the 5 years after this. So, again, at this sort of small level, we're able to show that by taking this approach, we can get tangible safety benefits. There have been some sort of maintenance issues, and there's discussions about, about cost and maintenance and things that are really important when we start to look at the entire network, but we'll get to that later on. And this is an interesting thing that I find fascinating from that project, and it's really just to make the point that if we listen to one person, we get a certain point of view. If we take the care to look at a range of people, and I think Bryan pointed that out really nicely with the speed limits work that we're doing in Auckland to get sentiment from people across the whole area. I just love this, it'll be with me forever. Then, we can see we get two different very stories. This is what the hell are you doing? This is actually, yeah, we quite like the streets. And that's because we've taken the care to get some proper data from people in a proper way. This was, I think, around 200 residents or so in the area. And it just shows us that if we can do that systematically, we can actually, that's the basis for a really compelling conversation, which then we can start saying, well, actually, guys, this is how it works. It's not just this one voice that we're hearing from the odd person that should be making sense. So there's lots of ways we can get data from people and work with people to get information. We can hang out where they normally are and just talk with them and have casual conversations. We can have focus groups. We can do things like go along, surveys and on-site user testing. We can just look at desire lines and see where people move. There's lots of things that we can be doing. And if we do this stuff, then what it does is it minimises the risk in a project. It maximises the likelihood of success. And it gives you a better chance of actually succeeding and getting the outcomes that you're after. You can just watch people as well. And so, for example, in this case, what is it that makes someone walk across a level crossing when there's a train coming? What is it about that? What is it about people's attention, where they're looking? And if we apply the right frameworks, what is it about people's risk-taking in this situation? What is it about the design of that crossing that makes it quite attractive to run across there, even though there's a train coming? Thankfully, there's pedestrian gates there, so that's a nice sort of getting towards a sort of a safe system solution. But we can learn lots just by looking at people and applying the right frameworks to that. And this is what we've been doing in another project. This is Te Aramua Future Streets, a project in Mangere in South Auckland. And this has the goal of making streets safer and easier for walking and cycling. And actually safer for everyone. A lot of work has gone into engagement to understand people, how they get around, that sort of thing. And there's been a lot of work going to understand what people think of it and how they're behaving afterwards as well. And so we're learning quite a lot from this. There's a lot of sort of normal things in here, but a lot of innovative things in here as well. And so we're trying to understand how these things come together. Again, it's great to do it at a neighbourhood or a suburb level. The big question is, how do we do this at a city level? How do we do it at a country level? And I think next steps in this area is thinking about what's the optimal sort of suite of tools, whether it be speed limits or cost-effective measures that are going to give us maximum benefit for the minimum price, so we can actually spread this stuff in the best way around the whole city or country. So we're learning lots from Future Streets, and we've learned that how people cross the road and how easy they find it in a wheelchair, for example. The speeds have gone down a lot and are behaving as we expect them to on the right streets. We understand what people think of it, of different parts of it, that sort of thing. Encouragingly, what we're seeing afterwards is that deaths and serious injuries are tracking in the right direction. When we compare that with the control area of Mangere East, we can see that deaths and serious injuries are coming down, while in Mangere East, deaths and serious injuries over this period have still been increasing. That's not to say that's happening in the last year or two, but certainly over this period, that's a trend of increasing, just like Bryan showed, of road safety problems are actually increasing where we're not making these changes. So things are looking encouraging at this point anyway. Again, I just want to make that point about how do we get the pace of change that we really need. We've got some pretty ambitious targets. We want to have a country level of 40% reduction in deaths and serious injuries by 2030. We've heard about zero deaths in Auckland by 2050. How do we get there? What are the actual steps we need to put in place to actually get there? What are those sort of logical steps that need to set us on that path? And I think, you know, the example of the speed limit, the ambitious sort of speed limit program in Auckland is a nice example of the sorts of things and the sorts of scale we need to be thinking about if we are going to meet these targets. But one thing I think we need to be doing is being a lot more integrated in how we work. And we talk about road safety a lot. And, you know, I've been working in road safety for a number of years. And sometimes it feels like it is a bit of a club. You know, there's a bunch of road safety people. But then over here we have all these sort of walking and cycling people. And over here we have all these public transport people. And I think we need to be much, much more integrated in how we're approaching these things. Because the thing is, with a lot of these projects, they've actually got all these benefits. They've got access benefits, they've got public health benefits, climate change benefits, and road safety benefits to come with it. If we can sort of harness all those benefits properly, we've actually got like a mega case for some of the ambitious things that we need to be doing. And, you know, some of those big things we know is actually reducing car trips. And that sounds like a fairly extreme thing to say in a road safety context, but if you just look at COVID, for example, what happened when we took those car trips out of the system? Road safety, you know, it improved. The crashes and the deaths and serious injuries went down. Now that's quite extreme, but we do know that simply exposure to traffic is one of the biggest determinants of road safety risks. So, you know, if we can maintain accessibility through a range of modes, but actually try and reduce these examples where a person is just going around in a metal box with all the energy that comes with that, then I think that's going to be a big deal in terms of improving road safety. Just finally, in the human factors, the area that I work in, there's been some sort of changes over the time, and one of the more recent sort of developments is this idea of organisational factors. And I think in the road safety space, we talk about safety management. Basically, it's how we organise ourselves as professionals to actually deliver on road safety, and this has been a big focus in New Zealand and overseas in more recent years. And this is just some research that we've been doing in recent times, looking at various projects like Future Streets and other projects to see in the previous model communities and other projects like that, just to understand what the barriers and enablers to delivering these projects actually were. And when we sort of unpick it and we look at all the journey that these projects have been on to actually try and get them over the line, get them delivered, funded in a timely way, all that sort of thing, these themes emerge. And one of the biggest things that really sort of pops out when you start to sort of dissect these projects a little bit is that we don't have really a good culture of innovation. We need to have innovation functions that are built into how we do things. We've got great sort of things emerging, like innovating streets for people. We've had for a while things like traffic control devices trials, but generally we don't have this sort of large-scale culture of innovation in our organisations. Where we're actually sort of promoting sensible and considered change, as opposed to just coming back to what we already know. And I think that's a big cultural shift and a functional shift that we still have to make. In terms, I think we're sort of starting to talk about innovation. In some cases, we're doing it, but I think we've got a long way to go in this particular space. That's all from me. Just coming back to these principles. If we can create functional streets for everyone, but also do that at a network level, to create those mental models, those mental scripts on people's minds, so we're habituated to what's normal. We can work with people, with data. We can integrate our benefits and harness these collective benefits to increase the pace of change in road safety. And then finally look at how we work and be a bit more promoting of innovation. Then I think we're going to be well on the way to reaching our targets.
Good to go. Good morning, everybody. I'm going to give you a bit of a speedy overview of the art of low-speed street design. We're running a little bit behind time, but I've been told not to panic, so I won't rush too fast. So I think it's been great that the previous speakers have really set the scene for this last one. So with Bryan's discussion about Auckland, that was really looking at an area-wide approach. But also he nicely set the scene for what are the benefits of low-speed streets. Hamish then came in and looked at the neighbourhood level and posed a lot of challenges for us in terms of how we can actually get these results. I'd like to talk about how we might achieve these lower speed sort of town centre streets or main streets through suburban areas. Just like here in Island Bay Shopping Centre in Wellington, So drivers are coming down a road which has a 50k speed limit, and then they're presented with a 30k speed throughout the town centre, which is highly appropriate because there's a lot of people in those areas. They're all crossing the road. There's a lot of activity. So 30 is totally appropriate. But how do we actually achieve that? So I'm just going to run through some design tools and then a couple of design challenges. Like, there is loads of design challenges and I cannot cover that today. But I'm going to talk about a couple that I've observed and how we might deal with those. So at a network level, there's obviously operational things we can do, like coordination of traffic signals, block length. And in Auckland, probably congestion actually helps keep speeds down as well. But I want to talk about some physical design tools today. And I thought about how you categorise those tools. And there's many ways you can slice and dice it. But I came up with the 3 Ds. So firstly, direct messaging. How can we communicate to drivers directly that they need to go at a lower speed limit? How can we do it in a discrete way through our design? And then also, how can we then reinforce that with design devices? So that's our road humps, etc. So what I wanted to talk through today was just some examples of each of these. So with direct messaging, gateways and thresholds. Obviously, as you enter a zone, even with the previous slide in Island Bay, you have nice big signs and you have build outs, planting, and then also our red road paint in the lower left there. We're actually saying, hey, this is 30. We've just gone from 50, this is 30. Shared space streets to me are a very direct way of messaging because no driver is going to enter that space and go very fast. It's totally obvious. There is also signage. So residential street, that's the New Plymouth. I thought that was quite a nice way to give context to drivers entering that street. I like the way that the City Council here in Christchurch has adopted these 30k signs that actually show humans on them. So this is a sign on my street. I'm very, very lucky. I live on a neighbourhood greenway, which is 30k's, and that sign to me is brilliant. And I call it an emotive sign because it's saying to people, actually, you know, there's humans involved here. And electronic signage is also useful. It gives people that heads up that they are going too fast. I prefer the ones that have slow down as well. So once you actually go above the speed limit, you're getting this message slow down. So discrete messaging, narrow traffic lanes. There's plenty of research out there that says that if you make your traffic lanes a certain narrow width, then it will help keep the speeds down. We all know that as drivers. When we're driving around, and you just observe yourself what you're doing. If you're on a road that is really wide, you just feel like you're going to go faster. It's just human behaviour. But I think it's also important that it's the overall width as well. So you may have a traffic lane that's nice and narrow, but something else that's making the road wider, and that's one of the challenges I'm going to talk about. Vertical narrowing, so providing street trees and building frontages close to the road actually creates a sense of a corridor and you feel like you want to go slower. Small corner radii, so some of our intersections over time we've realised that these big wide sweeping radii are just not helping keep the speeds down. I like that example there in Worcester Street in Christchurch where it's very tight, but if a truck wants to get around there, they still can. They just have to swing out a bit, that's fine. The bottom centre photo there, that's Nelson, where they have, in the town centre, they've got no centre line. They've got the sharrows to say, hey, cyclists, you can share the road. But the busy activity on the side with the parking, car doors opening, etc., that side friction also helps keep the speeds down. And surface texture as well. So when drivers go over these bumpy patches, it sends a message, oh, this is a bit different. And then, of course, our design devices, our classic, what we call traffic calming devices. So we've got our traditional road humps, which work better, in my view, when you actually put them in a road narrowing. Chicanes, that's a one-way chicane on my cycle route into work. Raised platforms and intersections, so these becoming very common, a great tool. They're a standard safety intervention tool popping up all over the place. Speed cushions, so that photo there of the speed cushions, that's actually in Island Bay, the first photo I showed. And things like road narrowings, and I'm a big fan of the one-way narrowing because then people actually have to take note of what's going on. So, the width of the road. So I've mentioned traffic lanes, but I think sometimes it's the width of the, or what happens with the cycle facility that will actually influence people's behaviour. So when you have narrow traffic lanes, but you still have your cycle lanes, your overall width of that road is quite wide. So it doesn't feel like you're constrained, and observing some of these streets in 30k roads around Christchurch, there is still a tendency for people to think they're in a 50k environment. As opposed to the example there on the right, that is St Asaph Street in Christchurch, where the cycle lane is actually separated. The two lanes, this is a one-way street with two lanes, are very narrow, and I think that when I drive down there, I feel like I need to go slower. We had another example in Christchurch, Island Road some years ago. It was one of our kind of probably first off the rank separated cycleways. And there was quite an uproar from the community about we're hitting the separators. Well, that's because you're still driving at 50 in a 1 metre traffic lane. So, you know, I think that's our challenge. We need to obviously cater for cycling, but we need to think about how we can do this a bit smarter. Something I sort of played around with some years ago when we were looking at the central city here in Christchurch around our one-way streets and how we've got some really long blocks. We've got some 200-metre blocks, and even signal coordination may not be that helpful in that instance. So how do we provide some narrowings along that street but still catering for cycling? So that was just an idea I came up with, where you would actually have a cycle bypass. Not too onerous for the cyclists, it's not going to take them too far out of the way, but it means as you're looking along that road and you have trees in it and what have you, it would feel a bit narrower than just having a completely 200-metre long length with cycle lanes and traffic lanes. So that's just, you know, we've got to think a bit more laterally about how we do this. And the other challenge I think we face is that not all ramps on our raised platforms are created equal. I have been observing drivers in my area because I have a lot of raised platforms near my house because of the cycleway. And I went out and measured this one the other day, and that ramp is 1 in 12, and that actually works quite well. I've observed people responding to that. This graph here, don't get too bogged down in the numbers, but essentially what that is saying is that if we want to get some speed response, certain speeds, then we need to make sure our gradients are appropriate. So it's very hard to see on point for the Christchurch people, but essentially in this zone, we want to be around 1 in 12 or steeper. Because if we go any shallower, we're not going to get a speed response. And if we start getting this is peak vertical acceleration of the vehicle as well. If they're going it too fast, then they might get some damage, or that'll serve them right. So really, the message here is that we may need to apply a mixture of these things. So that's the art of it, is how do we mix up the direct messaging, the discrete messaging, and the devices to get the outcomes. And a lot of those can be applied in a transitional way. So Hamish touched on innovating streets, tactical urbanism approach. Those kinds of things can still be done in that way. The photos I showed you were permanent features, but you can also apply them in a transitional way. The devil's in the detail with the overall design. If you show a raised platform on a plan, it may be that the design of that is actually quite critical. I do understand that Waka Kotahi are working on some raised safety platform design guidance, and that will have a lot more detail on ramp gradients, etc., to achieve those things. So I look forward to seeing that. And lastly, you just may need to think outside the toolkit every now and again to achieve these lovely low-speed streets. And that could include flags flying from trees. Thank you. We will now open up to
Questions? Yes. Thanks, Jeanette, and thanks to all of our speakers. So just in terms of the Q&A, I think we'll start with Christchurch. So if we've got any questions here, maybe either in a nice loud voice, or I'll repeat it for our online audience if it doesn't get picked up. So any questions in Christchurch to any of our speakers? Everyone on the spot and they're all looking sheepish, so that's okay. Oh, Bryan, yes.
Question for Jeanette. How do you see an increase in e-bikes and micro-mobility playing into your safe street and slow speed design?
in terms of them being on the road, e-bikes.
Yeah, I guess it's
Yeah.
around those choices about where do they go, where do you allocate the width to?
Yeah.
Do you mix them? Do they need their own space?
It's a very good question, and that's something that you fundamentally need to think about right at the start of the design process, and it will be context specific. So the Island Bay example, you're coming along Island Bay in an off-road facility and you get to that town centre area and they put sharrows in, so you share the lane on the philosophy that it's a lower speed environment. And I think if they'd continued and put in cycle lanes, it would have been too wide and there's no way they're going to get 30. So it kind of comes down to your approach to that entire street and also part of the network as well. I guess e-bikes potentially might violate that speed limit of 30 k's. I don't know. You go over 30 on yours, Jodie?
I have a governed one, so it can't go any faster than 32 kilometres an hour.
Yeah, so I think how we mix in those modes is one of those fundamental decisions right at the start of your design process, and it will be totally dependent on heaps of different things. So, yeah, I'm not sure if that answers your question, Ryan, but
Yeah, that's good.
Okay, anything else from Christchurch? All right, Colin, can you see if there's any questions in Auckland, and you may need to repeat them through the microphone just so that all of our Christchurch people and our online attendees can hear the question.
Okay, any questions from Auckland? Or other,
about funding. The road safety comes from a certain bucket of funding, but how do we ensure that projects that are funded through other sources, like that come from other funding buckets, include safe outcomes when they're not measured directly on safety benefits?
so how do we get funding from other funding streams?
So I can answer that.
Yep.
So that's a really good question. So yeah, how do we ensure other projects that are built also include those safety benefits, which is a key thing. At AT, for example, one of the things we're looking at recently is making sure that all the projects and gateways in the pipeline do include things like a safety assessment framework, and those strategic safety benefits are articulated in each of those gateways, right from the concept in the planning stage right through to decisions that are made in construction. It's a really important question, because I know from an AT point of view, whilst we've got our recipe program business case, and that's well and good, and we can go around and spend our money as best we like on the network, if we're not building stuff that is already inherently safe, we're not going to get there. And it's the big uplift is in exactly what you're saying, Bryan. So yes.
One more question?
Why can't we have default safe speeds on our residential streets?
Why can't we have default safe speeds on the residential streets?
I think from an AT point of view, we would probably love that, but the challenge is going through the process to get to those outcomes. So the process for the first tranche of speed limit changes we went through at AT with 600 roads took 2 years to go through the whole bylaw process. Very time consuming. There will be tranche 2, tranche 3, and possibly even a 4th tranche in that, so we're pushing on that more and more. The conversation about default limits, though, is probably more of a central government authority type conversation piece, but from my point of view, I'll be very supportive of that.
Hamish?
Just
Sorry.
Just to build on that, I think it's a really good point Bryan makes about the central government leadership, because if we go back, and it is a historical one, but I always like the example of the 30km/h speed limits introduced in the Netherlands in the 90s as part of sustainable safety. That was done at a national level, and it had a national rollout. It was done for the whole country. It wasn't done all at the same time, but it was rolled out nationally. And that's led to sort of 30 to 40% reductions in death and serious injuries in the Netherlands. So I think you're right. It's probably that strategic approach down is going to be useful.
Yes.
Sorry,
Can you speak up?
sorry, this is more of an observation. Just the RMA seems to give us, when we're working at the very sort of like so much of it's so fragmented. In the development planning team at AT, we find that we're almost trying to retrofit the network site by site through development that we get, and obviously there's only so much we can do. We can speak to development, it's not simply at the written to notify the client. It's a space I'm super frustrated, because it's like we've got all these things that we want to try and get traction, and I've got a particular consent at the moment where we're trying to pull out an intersection and various things, but sometimes you just very limited.
I can perhaps just repeat that for others online, still up there on the mic here. Just really some feedback from AT in terms of limitations of the RMA in terms of trying to impose road safety change. That paraphrase it?
Yeah,
much more briefly appreciate.
But,
Has AT considered changing the goal of demand management to reducing traffic rather than reducing congestion? Because I think if we reduce traffic, we might be able to actually reduce this exposure we're talking about.
Yeah, so the question was around reducing demand management. Has AT considered that?
Demand management presently aims for reducing congestion, not reducing traffic.
Yeah, so it's a really interesting point, because I know at AT one of the things we have been accused of being anti-car, right, which is an interesting thing, but we are promoting the other modes lots and lots. So public transport mode shift. I think what I've seen, the figures pre-COVID in Auckland, there have been world-beating increases in terms of use of PT. That's one of the things we've been looking at. There are other things that we've got in train as well, looking at trying to manage that demand, and things that have happened in other cities like London and those sort of places, well, potentially are things that we might be looking at. But again, that would be also lobbying central government for some of those changes as well. But absolutely, because we know the less trips, the reduction in vehicle kilometres travelled reduces the exposure and reduces the risk of crashes, basically. So yes. Yeah. And just sorry, to answer the other question about the RMA consent stuff, I share your frustration. It's really quite a challenging piece, because that developers try to build the least cost thing that they can get away with, and if the standard and if the requirements and if the RMA aren't set up appropriately to actually articulate a different thing, it becomes really challenging for AT, and I absolutely get that. So one of the things I think that we need to do as AT is lobby more for that change in that space, because if Road to Zero is the central government strategy for road safety, then the RMA needs to support that, would be my view.
Okay, I think we might have time for one or two questions from our online audience. So, Dale?
Okay, thank you for everyone who did submit a question online, and unfortunately we aren't going to get to all of them today, but this was one of the first ones to come through. Isn't there an inherent tension in providing streets for all when high levels of service for one mode may require low level of service for another, for example, level of service for driving versus walking?
Would one of our panellists like to have a crack at answering that one? Bryan, can I put you on the spot for that one?
Sorry, I was just trying to repeat the question there. So it is there's always a compromise between trying to provide a high level of service for one mode over another?
Yeah, so I think if I understand the question, so this gets back to that whole concept of around, I think, movement and place. So one of those concepts is around, you've got places like residential street, which are places or places you want to go to, like shopping trips and that sort of thing, versus what is the throughput of of the network. So if you've got a major arterial running through the middle of a shopping centre, and I think about Newmarket as a great example of that, where we've got a major road thoroughfare through what is a shopping precinct, how do you balance those priorities out? Yes, there's a natural tension around that space. I know at AT we've got our sort of design guys are trying to articulate that far better than they've ever done, and getting that movement in place framework appropriately embedded into what we're doing, and it really gets to the point of network planning. You know, so if you can put, we've had conversations recently at AT where we've got a corridor where we're trying to put buses, we're trying to go through a shopping centre, we've got cyclists, and do you actually put some of those modes somewhere else or adjacent or nearby in a network planning sense to actually remove that conflict? It's a really challenging piece. It's one of probably the key things I guess we deal with in terms of network planning from a road control and authority point of view.
Okay, thank you, Bryan. I don't think we have time for any more. I don't think we have time for any more questions. Can I just remind everyone about the fundraiser for Break? So please take a note of that. We will be sending a link out to the fundraising page and a recording of the seminar to everyone that has registered. And also just a reminder about the Australasian College of Road Safety. If you're not a member, please consider that and visit their website. And lastly, and most importantly, hopefully everyone here in person and online has been inspired to make some positive change in the world of road safety today. And a huge thank you to our three speakers, Bryan, Hamish and Jeanette. So we've covered off the big picture and what's happening in Auckland, through to making sure that we have very people-centric design and understand how people work, from Hamish, and then Jeanette providing some great examples of the other things that we can do as professionals and engineers and designers and organisations to actually implement design that gives effect to those low-speed environments that have huge road safety benefits. So can everyone just join with me and thank our speakers today. That's it. Thank you, everyone.